What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim, and I'm super glad to have you as a listener today. If you're new here, I want you to know what this podcast is all about. This podcast is about teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, assisting you in all aspects of your life, and helping you to laugh, level up, and live to be 100. Results may vary. Ask your doctor if Your One Life podcast is right for you. Psych! This podcast is definitely right for you. Don't listen to your doctor for podcast recommendations, just like you wouldn't listen to me for medical advice. I have some low-key though. Hit me up on Instagram. I got you, fam. All right, so what I'm doing in this episode is I'm doing another recap episode. And the reason why I'm doing a recap episode is because I need a recap myself. And if I, the person who taught you about these things, needs a recap, then you definitely do as well. See, we all need to revisit our learnings often because forgetting is easy to do. So in this episode, I'm going to cover the 3 books, Steal Like an Artist, the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, and Nonviolent Communication. And I'm going to do this recap just like I did my previous episode, which is to go over some of the most important teachings in the full episodes that I did. And of course, if you have not listened to those episodes, this will just be a preview of what's in each episode. So the first book I'm going to cover is Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. And one idea that he drops in his book is as you look at your heroes, find the people who influence them. Go up the lineage, as doing this will help you to think a lot more like them. So I myself greatly respect Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think he's lived a very good life, not just with basketball, but also with his activism. So I looked at him and I was like, who are his heroes? Well, I went at the lineage and it turns out Mahatma Gandhi, his coach John Wooden, his friend Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, and Dr. King. So find who influenced your heroes and don't just steal from your heroes, but steal from their influences as well. And as we use the word steal, the phrase steal means to take something from them, but don't full on plagiarize. What you're doing is you're taking things from great places and you're making it eventually your own. And that's how great artists and great people succeed. All right, another idea he has is to have a swipe file, which is a folder full of stuff you swipe from other people. And what he says is you can do it analog, you can do it digital. You can have a folder on your phone or your computer. You can take screenshots, which is something I like to do, but just create a system that works for you. And the swipe file is there for inspiration. The swipe file is there because you're going to reference something in the future. But the swipe file is what helps you to create great things. And I do this frequently. I've taken so many photos, particularly from books I've read. And not just pictures of each time I found Waldo, but also great quotes, great passages, illustrations from books. And my swipe file is super helpful in helping me to create the art of my own. Another thing he says is go analog. Here's a quote from the book. We don't know where we get our ideas from, but what we do know is that we don't get them from laptops. John Cleese. Now, I myself have been doing this for years. And what I've been doing for this podcast is I've been reading physical copies of each book. And then what I do is I highlight, I underline, I write words in the margin, and then I type up my notes. And then I print out those notes. And on the printed paper, I punch up the notes with a pen with jokes and other ideas. And then I go and retype my notes based on my punch ups. Then I print out a new copy. Then I grab a pen and then I start punching up again. And oftentimes I end up with 3 versions of each script. And that's how I end up with a final draft of each podcast script. So that's how the sausage is made. And his ideas of going analog have helped me out greatly in making this podcast. Another idea from the book is he says, find the most talented person in the room and go hang out with them. And he says, as you do, be relational, not transactional, and try to be helpful. I actually did this just the other day at the gym. I saw this guy and he was crushing his workout. And I rolled up on him and I was like, hey, man, you need a spot? And then he looked at me and he was like, yo, I'm doing crunches. Of course I need a spot. So there I was coming through clutch. And that's your lesson on how to win friends and get swole. Another idea he says is to keep a praise file or a praise jar of nice things that people have said about both you and your work. And when you're having a bad day, you can pull some of those praises out and read them to yourself to help lift your spirits. Now, recently, an Apple Podcast review came in that really lifted my spirits, and I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. Here it goes. Quote, "What a vibe, man. Was one of the only teachers I paid attention to, and now I can do it some more. Thank you so much, Mr. Kim. Hope all is well and continues to be." Now, that was Slat 320,000. And honestly, I have no idea who this is, except for the fact that it's a former student. But they made my day and they made my week. So Slat 320,000, thank you so much for that. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to be reading reviews on this podcast regularly going forward, because I think it's a great practice to celebrate anytime I've made an impact on other people. All right, the last idea I want to share with you from Steal Like an Artist is keeping a logbook. He says list things that you work on every day, which for me would be my pectorals. Oh yeah, brother, getting it in. But besides those, he also says you need to log the projects that you worked on, where you went for lunch, a movie that you saw, because he says the small details will help you remember the big ones. And as I've been doing this, what I was doing is only logging good things that happen or eventful things that happen, just to make it an easy habit to start. But I found myself on some days where nothing noteworthy happened. And almost always those days were recording days or podcast editing days. But as I was revisiting this idea, and I looked at the example that he shared of his logbook in the book itself, I realized that his is way better, and I need to start doing it the way he's been doing it. And if you have not read this book, please pick up the book. The visuals inside of it are awesome. He's an artist, and the visuals really help you to understand how to implement the things that he's proposing in the book. All right, let me go ahead and wrap up that last part. Yo, I'm talking about learning from your heroes and also the people that came before them. That's what I'm saying. You need to be seeking a whole bunch of wisdom. That's what I'm saying. You got to be fishing for some new thoughts. That's what I'm saying. You just got to drop a whole bunch of things in your swipe file. That's what I'm saying. Do it right now. Take screenshots. Do a bunch of other things. And that's what I'm saying. Yo, I'm just uttering a whole bunch of things about analog. Don't be on your computer all the time. You got to come through and move your mind and also your hands. That is a plan. You got to understand you don't need to be looking at screens. That's what I've seen. Understand there's a person that's most talented up in the room. You should be around them soon. You should just try to link up with them, but don't be transactional. Come straight through, be relational. And that's what I'm saying. It's amazing, though, that you could climb with them now. And that's what I'm saying. Yo, I'm just wild talking about a praise file. That's what we need, so we could drop a bunch of good old seeds up in our minds from good things that people done said straight from their heads to ours. And yo, for sure, I'm coming straight through. And yo, I'm just pure, kind of like a logbook when I write it down. And yo, I'm just coming through. And yo, I done found all the things I did in the past because I recorded. And that's what I'm saying. Words that reported, spit out the top. And that's how I go. Steal like an artist, up in the flow. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about the Almanac of Naval Ravikant by Eric Jorgenson. And wow, as I was going through my notes from the 4 episodes I did on this book, I came up with a long list of things that I wanted to share. I had to cut it down to less than half of what I wrote down. And man, I could do a whole episode just on the key learnings from this book, because this man is full of so many nuggets. Now, one of the things that I love about Naval Ravikant is he is always telling you to be yourself. He is always telling you to look inside of yourself, find your talents, find your genuine curiosity, find your passions, and then go from there. He says, find the things you're obsessed about and then achieve mastery in those things. And that's ultimately what we want to do. Now, here's a quote that runs in line with his ideas in what you offer the world. Here goes. The work you do when you're procrastinating is the work you should do for the rest of your life. That's by an artist named Jessica Hirsch. Now, if what you do when you're procrastinating includes impersonating police officers, you need to find some better hobbies. Now, you probably already know what you do when you procrastinate. And as I was reviewing my notes from this podcast episode, I started thinking about me writing comedy. I started thinking about how I try to make every single email that I write funny, every single text message that I write funny. I started thinking about how I bust out laughing in inappropriate places, and then I have to cover it with a cough. And then people ask me if I'm okay, and then I just say, yeah, I'm fine. It's just my tuberculosis acting up again. And as this is something that I can't turn off, what I've realized is I need to find more outlets for my comedy writing beyond just this podcast, particularly the inappropriate things that I can't say on this podcast, because my mom's listening, your mom's listening, and making old women clutch their pearls is not something that I really like doing. Another grand idea for Naval Ravikant is he says, find people with similar values as you, the rest doesn't matter. And you might have stuff in common with them, but if you don't have similar values, it won't work. Chris Rock has this one bit about a couple needing to be about the same thing. And he says, you can't have someone who smokes crack and someone who goes to church going out together. Because one of them is going to be like, hey, I'm going to church. And the other one says, I'm going to smoke crack. And those two people might have a lot in common otherwise. Maybe they both like playing tennis. Maybe they're both homebodies. Maybe they both have the same taste in music somehow. But if your values don't line up, it won't work. And the end of his joke goes like this. But if you get two crackheads together, you can have a marriage forever. Now, that's a funny way of illustrating the importance of having similar values. And I am right there with him. If people don't have similar values in me, I just can't hang out with them because those values will eventually come up and they'll do things that are egregious to me. And I will have to end that friendship, end that relationship. So what's the point of even starting anything if you don't have the same values? And along those lines, he says, play long-term games with long-term people. He's talking about friends, he's talking about business, he's talking about romance, he's talking about all of it. Recently, I heard Master P being interviewed on the radio, and he was talking about him and Snoop Dogg. And he's like, me and Snoop Dogg, we do deals together. We've been rocking with each other since 1998, and we are brothers in business. That's what you got to do. You got to have long-term games, long-term everything with long-term people. Don't think short-term, because what he says is the real benefits, the riches, all the good things that you want are found in the long term. So that's why you got to rock with long-term people. Now, another thing he says is surround yourself with successful people. And he says the way you're going to do this is figure out what you're good at and start helping people with it. So if you're good at scaring teenagers straight, keeping them out of a life of crime, go and do that for people's family members. And yes, this is similar to what Austin Kleon said. It is the same advice, but it's worth saying again because this could actually change your life. I know a guy who got to co-produce a T.I. song, which won a Grammy and launched his music career because he helped a producer set up the producer's computer and music interface because he understood that technology and had a skill set that he could help somebody with. So be generous, help people out, and eventually good things will come back to you. Generosity is the name of the game in all things, and being generous is a good thing to do, regardless if there's any rewards coming your way. Another thing he says is, as you surround yourself with successful people to become more successful, to become happier, surround yourself with people happier than you. Makes sense, right? So those are his ideas on people. Here's his idea on retirement. In regards to retirement, he says, stop sacrificing today for an imaginary tomorrow. When today is complete, in and of itself, you're retired. Now, as I think about retirement, I think maybe I want to be a bodybuilder because I really enjoy flexing in the mirror, but I'm not a huge fan of lifting weights, slathering oil on my body, or taking human growth hormone. So maybe not. But real talk, I did meet a guy recently at a park who has a boxing YouTube channel. Seems like a pretty cool guy. And his IG bio reads as such: I do stunts, acting, run, and I love my lady. My life is fun. Now, based on that bio, he seems retired to me, and turns out he must be, because he's 90 years old. And you know what that means? Old man strength, baby. Let's go. Now, something that's related to retirement is wealth, and he talks about wealth a lot. He talks about how do you get wealth. He says what you need is leverage. And he goes over the different types of leverage that are available for you. One of them being labor, having employees, which he says is the worst. Labor can also be your own labor. Either way, they're not great. He says money is actually a better leverage because money, you can invest it, and money can grow more money, and so on and so forth. And the more money you have, the more money you can make. It is what it is. But that's what he says is better. But he says permissionless media is the best. And permissionless media being books, YouTube channels, podcasts, apps, because they have an ability to make money in your sleep. They have an ability to reach the world. So if you can find out a way to make permissionless media or invest in it, then you can make a ton of money doing so. Now, as he talks about leverage, he says you need to leverage your time to make more money. And he gives this example. If you're a real estate agent, you can sell $300,000 homes or you can sell $5 million homes. And there's not tons and tons more work to sell the $5 million homes, but the $5 million homes will make you a profit over 10 times more than the $300,000 homes. And I personally like to sell homes worth $300,000 for $5 million. My name is Kim Young Kim. Welcome to my TED Talk. Now, like I said, there's this whole section on wealth, and I did a whole episode on that section. So go to episode 1 of that series if you want to go check out the rest. Another thing that Naval Ravikant talks about is reprogramming your mind. He said your mind has been programmed by people who are not you. Your mind has been programmed from your childhood, and you shouldn't just run with it because of the way that it's been programmed, which was outside of your control. And what he says is most people's minds are out of control, and he says your mind should be a servant and a tool and not your master. So his general idea behind this is to work on yourself, to go to therapy, to meditate, to read books on how to change, and to do the work to reprogram your mind. And I myself have been working on this and looking into ways that I can reprogram my mind, because I know that ultimately the way that our minds are programmed determines our success. And so you want your mind programmed in a way that will help you to win. Now, how do you reprogram your mind? One of the things that he says is you need to read. But as you read, you need a good foundation of reading. Don't read a bunch of BS. Don't read things just because they have catchy titles or they're new releases that are quote unquote bestsellers. He says what you need to do is read the classics because the classics have stood the test of time. And what he says is you don't need to read a lot of books. You just need 100 great books as your foundation, and make sure that as you read books, you get recommendations from smart people. Naval has a list of books that he recommends. And remember Austin Kleon's advice, read what your heroes have read so you can see the world as your heroes see the world themselves. A couple things that I want to add in there is some people that I respect very much don't read books that are less than 10 years old, which the more books I read, the more I understand why. And also, one thing that I've been doing is I've been looking at reviews, particularly on Goodreads, just to see what the feedback is. And if enough people are giving the same criticism of a book, it's just like going to a restaurant and seeing the same thing said about the restaurant over and over. More than likely, what's being said is true. Now, here's an important idea that he shares that I really, really feel like we should all take to heart. He said, when you have a situation, you can either change it, you can accept it, or you can leave it. But what is not a good option is to sit around wishing you would change it, but not changing it, wishing you would leave it, but not leaving it, and also not accepting it. This is sage advice, because a lot of our misery comes from not accepting things or not leaving things, or wishing that we would change something but not changing it. Now, one last idea that Naval shares that I feel the need to share is this quote: "When everyone is sick, we no longer call it a disease." And that is so spot on. If you've seen the movie WALL-E, they were warning us. They were like, hey, sedentary lifestyles, being stuck to screens, this is not the way you want to go. And this is the way that we're starting to go. And it's now the new norm, but it does not have to be the new norm. And we can do better with ourselves. And if nothing else, we can acknowledge the fact that we are sick, regardless if everyone's doing it. All right, let me go ahead and wrap up this book. You should surround yourself with folks who align with the values that you hold dear inside of your mind. Only think long term when you seek out people. When your day's complete in itself, that's a goal. And you need to build wealth for yourself with leverage. How will you be great? That's a question at hand. By getting your mind right, do the work, reprogram. By reading the right books, meditate, and seek out. Surround yourself with things that assist you in your one life, because it's a beautiful gift. All right, so that's all I got on the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Let's move on to the book Nonviolent Communication by Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. And as the title goes, it's all about communicating in a compassionate way, in a way with a lot of empathy, and he lays out exactly how to do this in his 4 steps of nonviolent communication. So here are the 4 steps. What you need to do is make an observation, and you need to make your observations without judgment of what someone is saying or doing that's either enriching or not enriching our lives. So for example, you're at a coffee shop, you get up to use the restroom, and when you come back, a stranger is on your computer, sending messages to your Facebook friends, pretending to be you, and asking your friends to donate to their child's school fund run. Now, you're going to observe it. You're not going to pass any sort of judgment somehow. And then the second step is to state your feelings. State your feelings when you observe the action that's taking place. And your feelings you'll state to yourself, and you'll say, I am mildly upset that they're impersonating me to help their kids' class get a pizza party. Now, as you have stated your feelings, then what you need to do is you need to state your needs that are connected to your feelings. And you do this to yourself. So maybe one of your needs is, I need my friends to understand that I don't support children in any way, shape, or form. And the last step is to make a specific request. So then you step to this person and you say, hey, would you be willing to meet me outside for a discussion on your recent actions? Boom. Those are the 4 steps of nonviolent communication. And in that last example, maybe your nonviolent communication leads to not so nonviolent communication. Now, as you make requests to people, what you need to do is you need to get honest feedback of what the listener is feeling, what they're thinking, and if they're willing to take a particular action. Now, as you communicate your requests and your desires, do not communicate them as demands with blame and punishment. Because what he says is once you start making demands, that's when everybody loses. Now, as you are dealing with nonviolent communication, Dr. Rosenberg says that shame is not productive. Shame blocks our ability to grow and to learn. Shame just leads to spiraling. And as he speaks against shame, he's not just speaking against shame against other people. He's also talking about shame against yourself. And what he says is when you do something and you realize maybe you didn't make the best choice or you may have done something wrong, of course, apologize if you need to apologize and all that jazz, but also to empathize with yourself. And instead of saying to yourself, oh, I'm such an idiot and oh, I'm such a failure and just, all the terrible things that you say to yourself when you mess up, what he says is to look at what unmet need made you act this way? Because when you can figure out what that unmet need is, what you can do is make a decision that is positive that also meets that need. And he says your needs are to be your guiding light. And as you practice nonviolent communication, this is one of the parts about it that I love the most. The goal isn't to compromise, it's to meet the needs of both parties. And I go into deeper depth on this idea in my episodes, and I highly recommend that you go check those out so that you can fully grasp how to communicate with the people that you care about and also just random strangers so that you can live harmoniously, that you can get your needs met, and you can meet the needs of others. One part of the book that I found hilarious is there was a dad who had a cheat sheet of the steps of nonviolent communication. And I know that comes off as really weird to have the cheat sheet and to use it, but what he realized is that he would be yelling at his son otherwise. And one time he started getting real agitated with his son, and his son was like, "Hey, Dad, get the cheat sheet, right?" And here's the deal. We all need more help in getting us to do the things that we're trying to do. We all need cheat sheets. That's why I made this podcast episode of summarizing this again to help jog my memory and yours so that we can do better in our day-to-day. All right, we're almost finished with the episode. Here's a couple last things that I want to share. He says, when you come up on people and violent communication is happening and someone is losing it, what he says is you need to empathize with the aggressor. You need to validate their emotions. That will help them calm down. You need to go up to them and say, "Hey, I understand what you're going through. I too have had someone ask me, 'Are you pregnant?' when I wasn't." Because what that does is that lowers their anger, and that's what you need so that you can talk some sense between the two people and diffuse the situation. All right, the last thing I'm going to talk about is how to thank people. He says, when you thank people or when someone does something great, when you tell them what they did was great, that is not the best way to compliment them. That is not the best way to show your gratitude of what they did, because saying someone's great, saying someone's awesome actually puts you in the seat of judgment. And so what he says is you need to celebrate what they did. You need to share what you feel as a result of what they did and mention what needs of yours were met. Again, we're coming back to the idea of your feelings and your needs. And he says, when you show your gratitude, you might be a little awkward, but he says anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Now, a few years ago, I was given the opportunity to say something at my friend's wedding. He's one of my best friends. And I totally forgot that this was something that happens sometimes at weddings where they open it up to the guests to say something kind about the bride or the groom. And this was not planned. I did not have a bunch of stuff written out like some of the people who stepped up there. But I decided I needed to get up there to say what I felt. And it was a bit clumsy, but at the same time, I did communicate my love of my friend. And yes, I might have used the phrase, "You're the wind beneath my wings," and "You complete me." And I may have quoted all the lyrics to the song, "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston, but that's not what's important. What's important is that I destroyed all the video evidence of my speech. But real talk, it wasn't my best speech by any means. But what ultimately matters is that my friend felt loved, appreciated, and valued. All right, so that's the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the follow button so that you won't miss future episodes. If you've been here previously, please rate and review the podcast. That helps out significantly. And if you do write a review, your review could be read aloud on the next episode. Also, one thing that you can do to help me if you are digging this podcast is to share a link of this podcast to anyone you know that needs to hear it, and also share a Spotify link in your Instagram stories. That would be super helpful and super appreciated. I want to give a shout out to my friend Siraj for making the instrumental for this podcast, and shout outs to you for the awesome things that you're going to do with the learnings from these 3 books. And please make sure that you go and listen to the whole episodes if you have not already done so. Each of those books will help you out greatly. This is Your One Life. I'm Kim Young Kim. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and until next time, peace!